Both candidates have made it a cornerstone of this election to talk about the deficit, the difference between how much money our government is spending and how much it is taking in taxes. And they both have talked about their plans in this debate.
I'll get us on track to a balanced budget, and I'm going to reduce the tax burden on middle-income families. And what's that going to do? It's going to help those families, and it's going to create incentives to start growing jobs again in this country.
If we're serious about reducing the deficit, if this is genuinely a moral obligation to the next generation, then in addition to some tough spending cuts, we've also got to make sure that the wealthy do a little bit more.
This is the deficit right now, $1,090 billion. If we all wanted to pay it off, every man, woman, and child in the country would have to kick in about $3,500. That's a lot, and yet each candidate says confidently, I can reduce the deficit. How would they do that? Well, first, let's talk about what they agree on. They all say that we're going to have to contain the spending of the government, control it. We're also going to have to rewrite the tax code, and we have to get the economy moving again, because that's what's going to produce money and revenue and really solve the problem. But beyond that, they don't agree on much. Let's look at the Romney plan first. If this were to represent everything he wants to spend money on, and he needs this much to cover it, he knows he's not going to get it because he has a deficit. So how's he going to deal with that deficit? He says he's going to do it with tax cuts. Now, tax cuts initially are going to make the deficit worse, so he needs to offset them. He says he's going to do that by looking at deductions and loopholes, things that people use to avoid paying taxes. Says he won't go after things like the mortgage deduction or the health care deduction, things that many middle-class people rely on. At least he suggests he won't go after those, but that's the problem. Economists say if you grab up all the other deductions that you might put on wealthier people and you put them all back in this pile, it's not going to be enough. You're going to end up eventually having to tax the middle class or watching the deficit just get bigger, at least based on the plan as they know it right now. Barack Obama, he has a different version of the same song. He's got all the things he wants to pay for. He also will not have all the money he needs for it. He's going to have a deficit too, and he says you can deal with it by taxing the wealthy. This is a popular plan with many voters, but it also has a fundamental flaw. There just aren't that many wealthy people in the country. If you define wealthy as being people who individually make more than $200,000 a year, as he often does, for every one there is like that in the country, this is how many there are who don't make that much money. You would have to tax this person at a much higher rate than the White House is talking about to solve this problem, and even then you probably wouldn't get enough money to really make up the deficit. The simple truth is both of these plans are woefully short on important details to tell us if they would really reduce the deficit. We need to hear more from both candidates. In the meantime, when they say, I can reduce the deficit, all we can do is give that a grade of I for incomplete.